stepped out of the cab, straightening my dress uniform, the medals on my chest weighing more than ever. After 6 long months in a high-risk, secure area, the quiet hope of finally returning home was all that kept me upright. But when I looked up, everything changed. There, centered on my neatly trimmed lawn, stood a bright red sign. Sold. Just beyond it, 2 workers in overalls were dragging my belongings out the front door. My books, my framed awards, my clothes, and dumping them into a large trash bin as if they meant nothing. On the porch, beers in hand, stood my father Richard and my brother Caleb, casually watching the scene. Richard didn't smile or greet me. He simply pointed toward the dumpster and said, "You don't live here anymore. We cashed out." Before I reveal what I discovered in that dumpster and the legal paper that was about to shatter their little victory party, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I want to see how widely this story spreads. I didn't run. I didn't yell. I simply adjusted my bag strap and walked up the driveway, my boots grinding steadily on the gravel with the measured pace I'd mastered over 10 years of service. My name is Jordan. I'm 29. In my field, high-level logistics and intelligence for special operations, you quickly learn that the loudest voice in any room is often the weakest. Panic was a luxury I couldn't afford on deployment, and I sure wasn't about to waste it here. As I approached, I noticed Richard's eyes shift. He had braced for an outburst, for the emotional daughter he could manipulate and control. Instead, he faced calm resolve. I stopped at the base of the steps and looked up at them both. The setup was meant to make me feel small, yet I had never stood taller. "Caleb ran into some problems," Richard said, sipping his beer like it was a minor traffic incident. "He owes dangerous people a serious amount, exactly $120,000. We had to move quickly." "We?" I asked, my tone even. "I don't recall being included in the decision to sell off my property." "Family helps family, Jordan," he shot back, the familiar guilt trip sliding out smoothly. "You're single. You're barely here anyway, always in barracks. You don't really need this place. Your brother needed help." I glanced at the house behind him. I remembered buying it at 22, right after my first combat tour, using a check built from danger pay and endless sleepless nights. That house wasn't merely walls and wood. It was the one spot on Earth where I could finally lower my guard. I had restored it myself, sanding floors until my hands were raw, painting the rooms a calm gray that finally silenced the chaos in my mind. I recalled Richard standing in that same spot years earlier, calling me selfish for purchasing it while Caleb struggled with rent. They had tried to shame me for my stability then. Now they were punishing me for it. But they had miscalculated badly. They believed they had removed my protection. They never understood that the real strength wasn't in the building. It lived inside me, untouched. "You used the power of attorney," I said flatly. It wasn't a question. "You signed it," Caleb added with a smirk. He lifted his arm to check the time, sunlight flashing off a shiny new gold Rolex. Flashy, costly, and clearly funded by a down payment on my security. "It was legal, sis," he said. "Dad saved my skin. You should be glad you could contribute." He didn't look rescued. He looked smug and overfed, a leech who had finally drained enough to feel superior. "I signed a power of attorney for medical choices," I replied, eyes fixed on the watch. In case I returned in a casket. Not so you could strip my life away while I was still alive. It's finished, Richard said, waving me off. The buyer's finalizing the paperwork in 10 minutes. The cash for those loan sharks is already sent. You can crash at the Highway Motel until your next deployment. No big deal. That was when the final thread of loyalty broke. It wasn't simple theft to them. I wasn't a person with dreams, rights, or a future. I was raw material to exploit, an asset they could flip to fix their mistakes. They hadn't just sold my house. They had sold me out. I looked from the Rolex to Richard's smug stare. Is the buyer here? I asked. She's inside doing one last check, he answered. Don't even think about causing trouble, Jordan. She paid cash. We need this to go through. I gave a thin, icy smile, the kind I usually saved for hostile targets. I wouldn't dream of causing trouble, I said, stepping onto the porch. I just want to greet the new owner. The door swung open before I knocked. A woman in a tailored beige pantsuit emerged. This was Sarah. One glance revealed her type, a sharp-eyed investor, not a family seeking a home. She clutched the deed like a prize, scanning for profit rather than comfort. You must be the daughter, she said coolly, skipping any handshake. Your father mentioned you might show up. It's done, sweetheart. Papers are signed, funds transferred. I need you off my property before I call the police. I looked past her. Richard stood by the kitchen counter, gripping a bank slip with shaky hands, his face glowing with the rush of a narrow escape. He spotted me through the doorway and flashed a broad, victorious grin that turned my stomach. It's finished, Jordan, he shouted, waving the receipt. 120,000 wired straight to the sharks. Caleb's clear. The rest is locked away safe. You can't touch any of it. No regret, no doubt, just pride. He believed he had executed the perfect crime against his own daughter. I turned back to Sarah. You wired the entire sum? 650,000, she confirmed, glancing at her watch. Cash. It cleared 10 minutes ago. Now seriously, leave my porch. I stayed put, letting the quiet stretch while Richard celebrated and Sarah grew restless. The moment had arrived. The trap was sprung, the prey caught, and the door had just clicked shut. You really should have waited for the full title check, I said quietly. Sarah scoffed. I purchase troubled properties with cash all the time. I cut through the delays to beat the competition. I know exactly what I'm doing. Do you? I reached into my jacket's inner pocket. The paper I withdrew wasn't a gun, but it would inflict more harm than any firearm I'd ever used. Because if you had completed the title search, you would have noticed that Richard doesn't own this house. He only holds power of attorney. I saw the document, Sarah snapped, though her gaze darted anxiously to the page in my hand. I reviewed it too, I corrected. He has a general power of attorney, which lets him handle matters for me personally. But I no longer own this property in my own name. I unfolded the certified copy and held it high. It was a recorded deed transfer, officially stamped and dated 2 days before my deployment. 6 months ago, I moved the title into the Jordan Revocable Living Trust, I explained, my voice steady and clear. My father is not a trustee. He has zero control over the trust's holdings. He cannot sell what he does not own. I glanced past her at Richard, who had frozen in the middle of his triumph. The receipt now looked more like evidence than a prize. "That signature on your purchase agreement," I said, pointing to the documents in Sarah's grip, "is not a valid sale. It's forgery. And because you transferred funds across state lines using false paperwork, that constitutes federal words fraud." Sarah grabbed the document from me. Her eyes raced over the legal wording, the dates, the trust stamp. The blood left her face so quickly she nearly swayed. The deed she had just bought for over $500,000 was worthless. "You," she breathed, staring at Richard. "You claimed you had complete authority." "I do!" Richard yelled, rushing forward, his voice breaking with fear. "I have the POA right here." "Read the details, Dad," I said coldly. "It covers health choices and personal banking. It does not extend to assets placed inside a trust. You just sold a house you never owned to a buyer who just lost $650,000. I faced Sarah again. Her disbelief was turning into cold fury. "Give me my money back," she snarled at Richard. "Reverse the transfer, now." Richard backed into the counter. I can't." "What do you mean you can't?" Sarah advanced, her heels striking the floor sharply. "I already sent the money for Caleb," he cried. "It's gone. The loan sharks have it. I can't pull it back." The room fell deathly silent. Sarah glared at him. Caleb stared at the ground. I simply observed, feeling the icy satisfaction of a plan executed perfectly. They had chased fast money and tried to sideline me. Instead, they had stumbled into a safeguard I'd prepared months earlier, with no escape route left. Sarah turned on Richard, her polished mask gone, replaced by raw, predatory anger. She stepped closer, and for a moment I thought she might strike him. "You wired my money to criminals," she said, voice shaking with fury. "It was a loan," Richard stammered, pressing against the fridge, sweat pouring down his face. I can recover it. Just give me a couple of days. We can sort this out." "Sort this out?" Sarah let out a harsh, broken laugh. "You don't have days. You don't even have hours. You just committed major theft. That money belonged to my investors. Do you understand what you've done?" She didn't wait for a reply. She pulled out her phone and dialed 911. "I need to report an active fraud. Large-scale theft. Yes, the person responsible is still on site." Richard watched her call, eyes hollow. Then his stare slowly moved to me. Panic twisted into something darker and all too familiar. No shame, no guilt, just burning resentment from a narcissist caught in the open. "You planned this," he hissed, jabbing a trembling finger at me. I leaned against the doorframe, arms folded. "I didn't sign anything, Richard. I didn't send the wire. You did." "You knew!" he screamed, voice cracking. He lunged, but stopped when Caleb grabbed him. "You stood there and let me sign those papers. You let me send that money." "I gave you an option," I replied evenly. "I asked if you wanted to be honest. You picked lies. You doubled down." "You set me up!" he bellowed. He wasn't focused on me anymore. His eyes darted past me to Mr. Halpern and other neighbors gathering on the sidewalk, drawn by the shouting. The true wound wasn't the coming arrest. It was the public shame, the destruction of his image as the caring family head. "You wanted to embarrass me," he shouted, pacing the kitchen like a cornered beast. "You wanted the neighbors to witness this. You wanted to paint your own father as a crook." "You are a crook," I corrected. I simply turned on the lights. "I raised you," he yelled, rewriting the past to shield his pride. "I gave you everything, and this is how you thank me? By tricking me? By destroying your brother over a house you barely live in?" I finally saw it clearly. Even with prison looming, he couldn't accept the role of villain. My self-reliance felt like treason to him. My ability to protect myself felt like an assault. "I didn't trick you," I said quietly. "I defended myself. If my protection feels like an ambush to you, that reveals everything." Sirens sounded in the distance. Flashing red and blue lights filled the space. Sarah gave the operator Richard's name. Caleb slumped to the floor, muttering. The fury drained from my father as the officers approached. "Jordan," he begged, changing strategy. "You can end this. Tell them it was all a mistake. I'm your father." "You stopped being my father the day you treated me like an ATM." The police entered and cuffed him without a fight. Neighbors looked on as the man who once dominated this home was led outside. I thought it was finished, until Caleb stepped in my way. "You think you've won?" he sneered, raising his phone. The screen showed a prepared email to my unit's inspector general, claiming I had sold stolen military gear. Fake receipts, a forged transfer. "One message like this," he whispered, "and your security clearance vanishes. Drop the charges. Sign the house over, or I send it." I didn't plead. I laughed. "Go ahead. Send it." He hesitated. "My records are audited monthly," I continued. "Your fake papers won't match official files. If you send that, you're not exposing me. You're admitting guilt." His phone slipped from his fingers. Arrogance gave way to terror. I signaled the officers. "He's trying to extort me using fabricated military documents. I want to file charges." They cuffed him too. He yelled that it was only a joke, but intent was all they needed. As the patrol cars pulled away, the burden finally lifted. I was no longer anyone's safety net. I yanked the sold sign from the lawn and tossed it into the bin. Inside, the house stood silent and empty. For the first time in years, no one required rescuing. I updated the security codes. A single, clear tone confirmed the change. I wasn't joyful yet, but I was secure, and that was enough. If you've ever had to play the villain in someone else's narrative just to protect yourself, share your story below.